So, you've decided to tell somebody about Bitcoin. I, for one, am glad to hear it. You have my congratulations and respect. Explaining Bitcoin is a noble endeavor. Other noble endeavors include bathing a leper, manually clearing blockage from a constipated mule, and applying for anything involving the words Phase 1 human clinical trials. My point is you're doing something that's highly necessary and will ideally make the world a better place in the grand scheme. In the immediate future, however, you will be miserable. You'll be miserable, tired, and really wonder how anything good could come of this. Bitcoin does not lend itself to casual explanation or to convenient metaphor. In fact, very few comparisons even suit it. It's a currency, but it works like a commodity. It's mined at limited quantities, so it's almost like gold, except it's created at an exact fixed rate and will end at an exact fixed point, so it's not like gold. The work of mining doesn't really accomplish anything either. Bitcoin is a train wreck of anachronisms to have to dump on any unsuspecting novice, and horrible pseudo-words like blockchain and hashcash just make it sound like more of a scam. Take all this insufferable jargon and add the fact that any given person you're explaining it to has used fiat currency notes their whole life, and you have a recipe for nothing. Probably nothing. There's the slightest sliver of possibility they'll understand and take interest, and the much greater likelihood they'll become exasperated and simply hate the stuff out of frustration, and I'm getting angry just thinking about it actually. You're more likely to create a frothing madman who calls Bitcoin a pyramid scheme, showing equally poor understanding of Bitcoin and of pyramid schemes, than an excited new adopter. What we need is a story. A story with a point, with a message, with an illustration of what we're trying to get across. In ancient times, before the centuries-old culmination of written human language was abandoned in favor of blogging, this was known as an allegory. In my last article, I made mention of a story that helped finally introduce me to the world of Bitcoin, and the more I've learned, the more apt the story has become. There's a strong allegory for Bitcoin in a currency that's already been used before. That currency is hundreds of years old, and there isn't anything else quite like it.
The primordial Bitcoin.
Off in the Pacific Ocean, among the Caroline Islands, is a particular trio of small islands known together as the island of Yap. Its native residents form several communities among the islands and number in the thousands. From its discovery by Spain in the 16th century until the turn of the 20th, it was a largely ignored Spanish property. Once the island fell under German ownership in 1899, more details of their peculiar culture were finally exposed to the Western world. More specifically, their peculiar economy. Yap was lush in vegetation and fairly sustainable, but had no precious metals or minerals to be found. So, for function of currency, they made stone coins. The people of Yap, keen on not half-assing the whole coin thing, decided to go big and to go home. They sailed up to 400 miles to other islands with vast limestone quarries so they could carve out enormous stone discs 3 to 12 feet in diameter, wheel them over to rafts, and sail them back to Yap. The men who carved the stone rolled it into a convenient place, even if it took a dozen extra hands to do so, and it was ready for trade. After they mined and moved the coin, its journey really was done. When the time came for a large trade, something on par with livestock or a dowry, the coin changed hands. By changed hands, I mean the two involved parties loudly and publicly declared that this particular coin here was now property of so-and-so, and proceeded to leave it right where it was. Nobody could be arsed to move the bloody things. They were massive, and the community was tight-knit, so why bother? Generations passed, and the stones never moved. Tallies were never marked or recorded on the stones. It wasn't necessary. Business was conducted and announced publicly, and the rightful owner of any given stone was common knowledge to anyone living near it. So, these stone coins weren't traditional coins. You could not fit them in the pockets of anything but the most clownly of pants. You couldn't even put them in a vault for safekeeping. They simply existed, and the community kept the knowledge of who owned which at any given time. Anyone who's arrived at letstalkbitcoin.com through conscious effort and not via any elaborate cat-on-keyboard incident should be able to see some of the parallels at work here. To those of you who see it, I say, shut up, it gets even better.
The stone blockchain.
For at least 3 generations, there was a particular family in a particular home whose wealth was well known across the islands. The family had long been owners of what might have been one of the biggest coins in circulation, and not one of those people on the islands had seen it. Those aforementioned generations earlier, this enormous coin was carved out and loaded up for transport by an expedition of incredibly ambitious Yap residents. Their prodigious haul slipped from import manifests and into mytho history when a harsh storm battered their rafts just a little ways from home shores. The raft carrying King Coin, or Coin Kong? I didn't really think this one through, sorry. Was cut loose, and their newfound wealth plummeted to the seafloor. Now, in a boring, physicality-obsessed fiat economy, this would be the tragic end of an otherwise uplifting tale of heroic and Homeric avarice. The story would be embellished, talk of sirens and wizards would be peppered throughout the narrative, and at the end of the day, these men would still be broke. The people of Yap, however, did not see what the fuss was about. The men of the expedition all vouched for the proportions of the coin and its general location. Adding to this the fact that it was lost only in the tangible sense and not in the fiscal one, there was no reason to go on using it. After all, they lost their millions to a storm, not to the craps table. Just like that coin between those two trees, or that coin next to Jim's house, or that coin of Bob's that looks conspicuously like a phallus but he gets angry when you point it out. This coin entered circulation based on reputation. It was that coin at the bottom of the ocean, and this family clutched it for years before spending it on God knows what. The stone coins already existed in a decentralized, community-enforced ledger. By this precedent, they no longer needed to even be tactile objects. Stone coins were simply a unit on a stone coin blockchain, tracked by group-verified transactions, and with only so many coins in circulation, the community kept fairly consistent tabs on who owned what. Whether or not Yap investors lived in fear of a 51% attack is beyond the scope of this allegory, but the point itself should be abundantly clear by now.
So the stone coins are an allegory for Bitcoin.
The point is that the stone coins are an allegory for Bitcoin. I hope I didn't make that too subtle. In this interpretation of the stone money of Yap as an allegory for Bitcoins, see previous sentences, the story becomes a functional teaching tool. The story of Yap and its coins is a place to start when introducing newcomers to the blockchain, and I cannot emphasize teaching the blockchain nearly enough. You don't teach a person what a Bitcoin is as much as you don't explain the texture, shape, and flavor of Yap's limestone coins. You tell them how they're recorded and how they're used. Just as each of us keeps a record of the blockchain, the people of Yap had to keep aware of who owned what. Ownership was a matter of public declaration. By spreading word to others, it became verification. You didn't own currency unless you got the majority of the community to agree you did. You did this by conducting your business transparently and announcing transactions to the world at large. A deal made in secret or made dishonestly was impossible. Transparency was part of their protocol. Bitcoin and Stonecoin changed hands almost identically. Whether limestone or crypto, these aren't the typical coins one rustles from sofa cushions in the pockets of playground extortion victims. We don't lay eyes on these coins. We just all agree on where they are and who they belong to. All our Bitcoins are on the metaphorical ocean floor, safely away from prying eyes and sticky fingers, and every member of the community is sitting on a hard copy of the ledger. We don't simply trust, however. Our ledger is produced, updated, and thoroughly encrypted by the same software protocol that made it possible. Prying eyes aren't left totally in the dark either. The same blockchain that tracks the ledger is protected from being altered, but is visible to anyone who wants to see what coins have moved where. What Yap enforced by culture, we enforce by encryption. What they cut from stone, we carve from graphics cards. It's these traits that made their stones and our bitcoins commodities instead of reserve notes. False value could not simply be printed off a press. Bitcoins and stone coins weren't empty promises generated on a whim. They are the product of an investment, whether it's time spent sailing or time spent mining a processor. The story of Yap, the stone coins, and the system they used is a great teaching tool, certainly. But it's not just for the outsiders. See, the story of stone money doesn't simply end there. All of us within the community can learn from what happened to Yap's stone coins when the taxman came calling.
Stonecoin goes to Washington.
After Germany got over the novelty of having their own tiny pre-industrial island, it decided to move in and get unpacking. They mercifully weren't too insistent on displacing or bothering the native culture too much, but they wanted room for military stations around the islands, and they wanted the infrastructure to connect them. The simple gravel walking trails connecting all of Yap's villages were awesome for bare feet and Batcave-sized novelty coins, but less than ideal for German road vehicles. The German government sent out word to all the village leaders that wider, modern stone roads needed to be implemented across the islands. It isn't in doubt whether or not the elders got the message, it just seems unlikely that any of them gave a damn what their absentee foreign overlords wanted. There was very little incentive to appease these strangers, and months upon months went by without any sign of the tropical expressway the military was looking for. The German officials, recognizing that no progress was being made, resorted to other means of motivating the locals. The callous Germans slaughtered the island inhabitants swiftly and brutally, is what you expected me to say, because you, sir, are a racist, and shame on you. These were turn-of-the-century bureaucrats, not Nazis, first off. Second, social disagreements didn't actually escalate into graphic violence at the rate that modern flame wars would have you believe. The German solution was so simple and non-violent it made Gandhi look like Manson. A few officials went around the island, spray-painting sizable black X's on the biggest stone coins they could find. They then proclaimed for all to hear that these stones were confiscated funds of the German government. The people of Yap had been fined. Durable, modern-sized roads appeared in very short order. Upon completion, friendly German officials were dispatched once again, this time with solvents to clean the marks off the stones. Their levied fines had been refunded. The people of Yap were manipulated, of course. But was their money manipulated, or was their belief? The Germans never took a thing away from the residents of the island. They simply preyed on their willingness to play by their rules. In their graciousness to be part of a larger world their European masters presented, the people of Yap mistakenly believed those paint-wielding officials' rules held real power over them. Forgetting that they themselves, the community, held power over their own money, they let the illusion of authority give a few bureaucrats real authority. There's an altogether different and much less funny allegory at work there. In the world of Bitcoin, we're beset on seemingly all sides by the specter of government intervention. We have men and women of our own community crying out for recognition, permission, and regulation from various political masters, all out of fear. Bitcoin isn't being threatened by the government, but we are. Bitcoin is a protocol, it's not a place or a thing, and to call it international is understating its virility. Bitcoin is apolitical. It transcends boundaries as if no boundaries existed. Law can claim about as much jurisdiction over Bitcoin as it can over wind and rain. It simply isn't all that vulnerable to governance. But we are, and we're projecting our weakness onto Bitcoin by begging for political legitimacy. In threatening businesses and individuals over Bitcoin, bureaucrats are again painting marks on values they don't respect. They can harm us as individuals, it's true, but we can't give them more power than they are due. So long as we go back and forth between cryptocurrency and fiat currency, we're pinned under their thumbs. The more we trade in Bitcoin as a currency, and not as a speculative medium for dollar gains, the more freedom we secure. Business and value are human creations, not political entities, and by seeking their approval and placating their whims, we give them political authority over us. If we keep volunteering to play the Bitcoin game by their rules, we may eventually start to believe them. And then Bitcoin won't be Bitcoin anymore. It'll be theirs. Thank you for listening. The story of Yap and the eponymous Island of Stone Money was originally told in 1910 by anthropologist William Henry Furness III. The subsequent 1991 revisiting of the subject by the Hoover Institution was researched and written by Milton Friedman. This interpretation and commentary of their works is entirely the product of this author.
Is the Bitcoin price in a bubble? Only time will tell, but one thing's for sure. Bitcoin video passes are on sale. Normally $75 for those paying in US funds. Visit bitcoinvideopass.com and spend only 0.1 to 0.2 Bitcoins, 0.12 Bitcoins at the time this was recorded, to access all the talks and panels from the October cryptocurrency conference. See how easy buying with Bitcoin can be and experience instant access as soon as you've paid without even reloading the page. Check it out at bitcoinvideopass.com.